Karen storms into the restaurant, screaming that she knows the owner and that we must give her and her group of pals the VIP table reserved for celebrities. The trouble is, I own the restaurant and have no idea who this lady is. But I decided to play along and see what happened. During dinner, one of the girls asked me whether I thought my life was meaningless because I worked as a waiter. That's when I realized all bets were off, and I was going to exact my retribution. This is what I did. This occurred around Christmas and New Year's. My grandparents immigrated to Canada from Italy in the 1970s and established a restaurant. When they died, my parents took over the restaurant, which they grew and enlarged throughout the decades. I've been working at the restaurant since I was 15. As my parents became older, they retired and became snowbirds, spending the winters in Florida. They sold the restaurant to me a few years ago, but kept a tiny percentage of the stock as a secondary source of income in addition to their savings. As soon as I took possession, I modernized the old place. I rebuilt the restaurant, altered the logo, and contacted local and national newspapers to place advertisements. I invited food critics, bloggers, and vloggers. It was slow at first, and I began to fear that the loan I took out to undertake all of this was the worst mistake I'd ever made, that I had ruined 3 generations of a family company. But soon it began to work. A local semi-YouTuber included us in one of his videos, which prompted more people to visit and review us. Even on a Monday, we were quickly seeing 5 to 10 times the regular volume of activity. We became a destination for large events, and it was not uncommon for a celebrity to stop by on certain evenings. I even invited certain high-profile clients to visit and cook for our guests. This cost a fortune, but we were completely filled for the holidays. People had to make reservations in July to get a table in December. It took years to get to this point. When things became busy, I didn't simply sit in the back office. I was on the floor doing whatever needed to be done, whether it was greeting customers, bussing tables, or mopping the floors. On nights with high-profile guests or events, I wore a jacket and took charge. One night, 6 women walked in. 5 of them appeared to be in their early 20s, with the leader looking to be in her mid-20s. My best assumption was that she was either an older sister of one of the females or an older sorority sister to incoming college students. I greeted them at the entrance, and as they approached, Karen was telling the others how fantastic this restaurant is, how delicious the cuisine is, and how there might even be celebrities there. When she approached me, she explained that she required a table for 6. I responded, "Of course. Can I get the name on the reservation?" She stared at me and replied, "Oh, I didn't make one, but it's okay. The owner is a personal friend of mine. He said he always keeps 1 or 2 tables open for special guests, and we can have one of those tonight." This is true for many high-profile restaurants, and I have been doing it recently as well, but I had no idea who this woman was, and she had never discussed any of this with me. I understood she was attempting to get in without a reservation, but she had chosen the worst person to try this with. I told her, "I'm sorry, but we cannot seat anyone without a reservation. As you can see, we do not have any seats available." I didn't want to go all out and say I was the owner, and we had never spoken before, so I never promised her anything. But I didn't want to embarrass her in front of the other girls. She then instructed one of the other girls to take a picture of me, announcing that she would speak with the owner and ensure that I was either scrubbing toilets or fired by the end of the week. The other girls behind her joined in, saying things like, "Yeah, kiss your minimum wage job goodbye." I wasn't sure if they were in on it with her, or if they truly believed she knew the owner. Karen then said, "Look, you can either give us a table, or I can make your life very difficult. This is not worth losing your job." She kept pointing, trying to belittle me, saying things like, "Obviously, you aren't anyone here, because if you were, you would know who I am and never try to tell me anything other than yes or of course." At that time, it had been a hard day for me, and from my perspective, I had 3 options. Number 1, I could inform her that I am the owner and call her out on all of this. Number 2, I could simply hand her the table and let things go. Or third, I could teach Karen and her friends a lesson. I selected option 3. I smiled at her and said, "Of course, ma'am. Please follow me." I handed her one of the 3 tables we leave free in case a celebrity walks in, which happens occasionally. I told her I apologize for everything and added, "You're right. It would be simpler just to give you the table." I also assured her that the first 3 rounds of drinks would be complimentary. I seated them and personally served them. As they sat, I informed them that we needed one of their credit cards and IDs just to keep on file, and we'd return them before they left. Queen Karen handed me her card and told her friends, "Tonight is on me." I took their orders, gave them their drinks, and informed them that, due to how busy we were, the meal might be delayed. The girls seemed focused on the drinks. They ordered 3 rounds and still hadn't received any food. Eventually, they called me over and asked me to check on it while giving me an attitude. I told them I would look into it, but also asked if they wanted additional drinks. They ordered 2 more rounds and were quite tipsy by the time the appetizers arrived, having mostly just enjoyed drinks on an empty stomach. As more food arrived, they continued to order more beverages. What these girls didn't realize was that they were at our VIP table, which normally costs a significant amount to reserve. I didn't charge them for the table, only for the drinks. By the end of the night, each female had built up a bill ranging from $500 to $600. I handed Queen Karen the bill for $423.23, which included tax and tip. Her expression changed instantly. She went from smiling to looking shocked. She immediately called me over and asked if this was a joke. I took the bill, looked it over, and apologized, saying I'd check the amount again. When I returned to give her the correct bill, she was stunned. I simply asked, "Is there something wrong on this bill that you didn't order?" She and the girls were surprised and went over every single line of the bill, realizing that some items were complimentary. They took out their phones to double-check everything. Queen Bee, visibly startled, said, "1 second, I need to use the restroom." I discreetly reminded her that we had her ID and credit card, just in case. 10 minutes later, she returned, clearly upset, and began sharing her thoughts on the food and drinks, asking if I could lower the cost. She mentioned that her friends would help, even though she had previously said the night was on her. Then, as if a light bulb went off in her head, she referenced her alleged relationship with the owner. I smiled and told her, "I'm sorry, but I can't change the bill." She then showed me a series of text messages from someone she claimed was the owner of the restaurant. I realized she might have been altering contact names to support her story. I reviewed the messages and told her, "That's not the owner's cell phone number." She insisted that he had multiple phones for business. I replied, "How about this? If we call him and he says it's okay to take 50% off the bill, then I'll do it." At that point, she started to get upset, which caught the attention of a few remaining patrons. I knew it was time to clarify things. I told her firmly, "Let's be honest here. You don't know the owner, and if you continue to raise your voice, I'll have to ask you to leave." Her tone changed as she attempted to defend herself as best she could. My response to her was, "My grandfather established this restaurant. My family has been running this establishment for generations. I've worked here for nearly my entire life. I am the sole owner of this restaurant, and I have never seen you, heard of you, or made any promises to a stranger I've never met before." The other girls were frozen and had no idea how to react. Queen Bee was in tears. I added, "Now, I provided you the table you wanted, one of these particularly reserved tables for high-end clientele, which I did not charge you for, along with 3 rounds of complimentary drinks. If you do not pay your bill, I will call the authorities and provide them with your identification." Karen signed the bill in tears, and the other girls reached into their wallets to hand her whatever cash they had, which was probably a couple $100s, with a promise to repay her more 2 days later. An angry man arrived at my restaurant and requested to speak with one of my bartenders. I was in the back office working, so he had to wait for about a half hour. The bartender was with him, but she kept her head down. I took them both to my office and showed him highlights from the security cameras, which had particularly high-quality audio because they were in the VIP area. We needed to keep good records in that region due to previous incidents. I showed him the majority of the footage, their remarks, orders, everything. When all was said and done, he rushed out with her, yelling at her the entire way. I have not seen or heard from any of them since, but the initial bill I gave them, which did not include the $120 oysters, is framed on my desk. As a side note, I did not lose as much money on the table and drinks as one might expect. The table was intended to be empty anyway, so I didn't lose anything because I hadn't expected to gain anything in the first place. The cost of the meal and other drinks more than compensated for the initial rounds. So, now that you know everything, was I in the wrong? Probably the most astonishing thing about the situation, aside from the money, was their perspective on the world. One statement from the group really stood out. They questioned whether I felt my life was meaningless because I worked as a waiter. This entitled viewpoint is something we see far too often. It's important to recognize that there is absolutely nothing wrong with having a job, regardless of the income. This occurs frequently with roles like janitors, and I dislike it when individuals believe they are superior simply because they don't work in those positions. There's nothing wrong with any job, including being a waiter. I'm glad the story ended on a somewhat gratifying note, with the father attempting to reverse the situation but becoming more frustrated with his daughter than the restaurant owner. The only thing that surprised me was that the restaurant was recording audio of the folks sitting at that table. I would probably avoid going to a restaurant if I knew my conversations were being recorded. Overall, I'm glad it worked out for me, but I'd love to hear how you would have handled the situation if it were your restaurant, and these were your customers. Was I in the wrong or not?
Why?